A civil rights organization, Yiaga Africa, has added a new twist to the general election conducted on February 25. They said that the results for Imo and Rivers states were inconsistent with its projection for the states. The organization raised the observation in its post-election statement signed by the chair watching the vote and executive director Samson Itodo obtained on Wednesday night and titled, "The 2023 presidential elections are once again a missed opportunity. INEC must be fundamentally reformed." They said that the results announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission were manipulated. Also revealed is that the state-level presidential results for Imo and Rivers are inconsistent with the Yiaga Africa WTV projections for both states. Joining us to discuss this are Paul James, head of election program Yiaga Africa, Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner, and Dr. Obinna Chukwu, also a legal practitioner. But before we begin in earnest, let's take a look at the press statement made today by the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi.
The election that we just witnessed have been conducted and results announced as programmed. It is a clear version from electoral rules and guidelines as we were promised. This election, as you know, did not meet the minimum standard expected of a free, transparent, credible, fair election. It will go down as one of the most controversial elections ever conducted in Nigeria. The good and hardworking people of Nigeria have again been robbed by our supposed leaders whom they trusted. However, let me humbly and most respectfully appeal to all Nigerians to remain peaceful, law-abiding, and conduct themselves in most responsible manner. Please be assured that Dati and I, and indeed all of us, this is not the end, but the beginning of the journey for a better of new Nigeria. During my campaign process, I would say that we will govern by the rule of law, because we know what not doing that will bring about. And that's why we say that. Let me reiterate, and I assure you that good people of Nigeria that will explore all legal and peaceful options to reclaim our mandates. We won the election, and we will prove it to Nigerians.
Okay, that was the presidential candidate of Labour Party saying that he's going to explore, or the party will explore all legal means to reclaim the mandate which he said that Labour Party won. And we're here being joined by all our guests, Paul James, head of election program Yiaga Africa, Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner, and also Dr. Obinna Chukwu, also a legal practitioner. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would like to begin with Mr. James, head of election program Yiaga Africa. Now, what the presidential candidate for Labour Party has just said is what your organization is saying. Would like to hear it from you. You say there are inconsistencies in the reports or the results that were uploaded by INEC and what you had in your situation room, as it were. So tell us more about these results coming from Imo and Rivers State. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. So tell us more about Imo and Rivers State.
Imo and Rivers State. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. So tell us more about Imo and Rivers State.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. So tell us more about Imo and Rivers State.
Yes, so let's be clear that we are not by this statement in any way supporting or endorsing any candidate. Our observation was purely from a non-partisan perspective, and this is also through a painstaking effort of citizens from the state. What we had done before the election was to conduct what is called a parallel vote tabulation. We deployed observers to 1,507 polling units, which are representative sample of polling that are randomly selected across the 36 states and the FCT. Now, what we did was what people know in the everyday life that we do. It's like going for malaria tests in the hospital. And then they take a sample of the blood, they run the sample, and based on that, when the test result is returned, it reveals that the person has malaria or not. In our own case, what we had done was to first look at the process leading to the outcome, which we thought by our estimation was fundamentally flawed. Now, if you notice in the statement, we did not verify the outcome, which is unlike what we had done in the previous election we had observed. From the process, for instance, we thought there were attempts to subvert the process. There were also attempts to suppress votes, especially in the way and manner that the Election Commission managed the process. If you think about arrival of INEC officials on election day, our observer data revealed that by 7:30 in the morning, only 27% of locations had INEC officials. And specifically, we noticed that the southeast and the south-south geopolitical zone had the lowest rate of INEC officials arriving. By 7:30 in the morning, only 11% of locations in the southeast had INEC officials, 29% in the south-south. By 9:30 in the morning, overall across the nation, only 41% of locations had commenced accreditation and voting. Although as soon as INEC commenced the process, it tried to also meet up with the time that it has lost in the morning. So looking at all of these concerns around the process, we were then able to make projections at the end. Even before INEC will announce its results, we had our estimates. So because we are not in every location, what you see us do is to provide range of what we thought every party could poll from the election. So consistent with what we have seen, for all the states that INEC have been announcing, others were within the range that we had estimated. But the moment INEC announced the one for Rivers State, for instance, we noticed that the figures flipped. And we decided to do a thorough check before we release our findings. So what we had done was to go to the INEC online results viewing portal, the IREC portal, and be able to check all the results that were submitted for Rivers State and for Imo State. And what we had observed for Rivers State, for instance, more than half of the results that were submitted were blurry. You cannot make any sense of them. Of the other half that were submitted, we then saw some falsification of results. So if we match that against what our observers had sent, we realized that for places where our observers had said one party was winning, what INEC announced at the end was for the other party. So we decided to spotlight those ones. For Imo and for Rivers State, although there were also locations where we saw overvoting, but we thought these were the ones that happened at a more higher magnitude that we thought to spotlight. But in the final report that Yiaga Africa will also be submitting, we are going to see some of these concerns from the state, but specifically we spotlight this because those are the ones that happen at a more higher magnitude.
Okay, knowing what you do in Yiaga Africa, which is almost like what INEC should have done anyway, can there really be something like overvoting? Knowing that we have the beavers, which will do the accreditation for everybody that is supposed to vote, and then where does the overvoting come from? How can that process be manipulated and we have overvoting in some areas? Explain to us, please.
Okay, because INEC, based on the Electoral Act, was supposed to strictly follow the guidelines that is supposed to ensure every voter is accredited using the beavers. We saw flagrant disregard for the use of the beavers in some locations. Overall, INEC made attempts to deploy beavers to all the polling units that we observed. We observed that in 88% of the polling units that we deployed to, the beavers functioned throughout the day. In 8% of the polling units, the beavers malfunctioned and was replaced. In other 2% of polling units, the beavers malfunctioned and was not replaced. Some of these were the locations that the beavers were not used eventually, and some of these locations were where INEC said it was going to continue election the following day because the beavers malfunctioned and was not replaced until 2:30 in the afternoon. So, for concerns of overvoting, in some places it was because INEC officials refused to use the beavers and we allowed people to just vote at will. So at the end, by the time INEC pulled all of this together, our data was based on the number of registered voters, not on the PVCs collected. So even based on the PVCs collected or based on the number of registered voters, you discover that the ballots that were placed in the ballot boxes in some locations were more than the number of PVCs collected or more than the number of registered voters. So like I said, we saw that in a couple of locations spread across 9 states, but they were not as significant as what we saw in Rivers and in Imo State.
Okay. Thank you. Let me go to Jide Ologun. You are a legal practitioner and you have seen the Electoral Act. This issue of overvoting, like Paul has just mentioned, is because in some areas beavers was not used. Was that even an option in this election of 2023, according to the Electoral Act? Jide.
As amended.
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
You see, that act was signed on the 25th of February, 2022. And if you look at section 47, subsections 1 to 3, it says a person intending to vote in an election shall present himself with his voter's card, the BVN, to a presiding officer for accreditation at the polling units. And to vote, the presiding officer shall use a smart card or any technological device. And this time around, we are talking about the beavers, as prescribed by the Commission for the accreditation of voters to verify, confirm, or authenticate the particulars of the intending voter in the manner prescribed by the Commission. So, you see, once we have all these laws, you will see discretion given to INEC in the manner prescribed by the Commission. And now, let's go to subsection 3. It says where a smart card reader or any other technical device deployed for accreditation of voters fails to function in any unit, a fresh card reader or device is not deployed, the election in that unit shall be cancelled and another election shall be scheduled within 24 hours. Another gap here, if the Commission is satisfied that the result of the election in that polling unit will substantially affect the final result of the whole election and the direction of a winner in the constituency concerned. So you see this discretion given to INEC. And talking about overvoting, in the new law, the yardstick for voting will be determined by the number of accredited voters, not the number of registered voters. All right. So these are issues. And, like I have said over these arguments we are having on these elections, that Section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended says that the National Assembly shall make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of Nigeria. So can we be more specific in the provisions that if we have taken the pain to amend the Electoral Act, let's be specific. Let's envisage, likely encounters in the ecosystem of our election processes. For example, we are talking about the final stage of even putting this new act into demonstration. The pre-election aspects have been, demonstrated. You recall the Section 84 subsection 2 that we argued vehemently then on the need for political appointees to step aside from actively getting involved at the primary level. That was tested. The need for INEC to receive money a year ahead of elections, that has been tested. You see, the substitution of candidates and stuff like that. And let's now go to the decision of returning officer on ballot paper, which is the critical issue now in the front burner. If you look at Section 65, subsection 1, it says the decision of the returning officer shall be final on any question arising from or relating to unmarked ballot paper, rejected ballot paper, declaration of scores of candidates, return of the candidates provided by the commission shall have the power within 7 days to review the declaration within 7 days. And this latitude given to INEC is subject to judicial intervention because a decision of the returning officer under subsection 1 may be reviewed by an election tribunal or court of competent jurisdiction in an election petition proceedings under this act. And as Labour Party is choosing to go for judicial intervention, the law has made provision for it. That's a legitimate way to go. And the PDP also, it could have been otherwise if other party was declared the winner. So my position really is that can we make our laws more concrete? Because the INEC chairman came out to give a guideline that they were going to transmit through to their IREC. And they came up with excuses of network and things like that. But if you go stricto sensu to what we have written down in the new Electoral Act, discretion given to INEC. And having said all this, the election, this review tribunal, they are waiting. The courts are there. And you know that except you approach the tribunal, except you approach the courts, the judiciary will just be waiting. So my advocacy really is that as we seek to grow our democratic system in the country, we should be more specific with the laws we put on the table and be sure that we have the infrastructural backup to drive the technology we are seeking to adopt. Recall that before this election, these beavers were mock tried in the Federal Capital Territory and some other locations in the country. But then we have several polling units where they will be deployed. And there was also the logistic issue. Some of the ad hoc officers who were expected to handle this technology, some of them developed cold feet on the day of the election. So these are issues that we have. But by and large, I think parties that are aggrieved during these elections, they have the legitimate right to proceed to the tribunal and the judicial arm of government.
Okay. Well, let me go to Dr. Chukwu as well. We may not know the language of the law as much as you learned gentlemen who are in the House. A part of the law of that Electoral Act that I read was talking about the mode of accreditation, that the accreditation shall be done like this, and then the uploading of the results shall be done like by using beavers and all that. They were using the word shall. And I was just asking myself, is it that when you use the word shall, it gives you options, or the word shall is a final thing? Because if that would be the case, after saying that the accreditation shall be done in so way using the beavers, and the uploading of the results shall also be done using the beavers, and it goes to another section and says that after all this is said and done, if the discretion of INEC officers is that they should cancel or not cancel, or do X, Y, Z, or not do it, they can go ahead and do what they think they should do. So what part of the law is being respected or not respected as it is? Do we have options when the law says you shall do this? Do we have options? It's just like having another perspective to what we've already spoken with Jide about. So tell us your own perspective. What do you see? How do you see this whole issue playing out? Does INEC really have that kind of power to choose what to do after the law has said they shall do this in the event of this?
Okay, thank you for having me. First of all, my learned brother made mention of INEC having discretion under the Electoral Act. That is true. But let us quickly, I just want us to understand, especially our viewers, to understand that, yes, your INEC has discretion. But once INEC has exercised that discretion by providing a guideline or by stating in the guideline that this shall happen after the other activities must have taken place, that at that stage is no longer within the realm of discretion. INEC has no power to now come back midway when the other contingent activities upon which the other one will be activated had already taken place. INEC can no longer come back. INEC has no further discretion to now stop the happening of the other activities. Like I asked, whether when the word shall is used in, whether it's in guideline or in the provisions of the law, the word shall connotes, when the word shall is used, it does not leave you with any option. It's not may. It's when the word may is used that one can now say, yes, is still under discretionary for you to either do this or do that. The word shall simply means that activities or activities upon which the word shall is used must be done. That activities or activities must be carried out. So it leaves no other option other than that. Then again, let me use this opportunity to say this. Every law has two things. There are two things that are in every provisions of the law or every act. Number one, we say the letter of that law. Another one, we say the spirit of that very provision or that very law. The letter and spirit of the Electoral Act, and as well as the guideline from INEC, which provides for transmission or transfer of a copy of a result generated at the polling station or polling stations to be transferred to the IREF or to a central server. The spirit of that law is to have number one, a backup or a database where all those results generated at the polling stations can be recorded, can also be used, assuming or in the event of any untoward thing or event happening to the documentary result at the polling station. That's number one. Then number two, it is also to be used to ensure that the tabulation or the collation at the whether at the ward or local government or state level or at the presidential level tallies with the results generated at the polling stations. These are the reason behind having all results generated at the polling station and transmitted or transferred also, or a copy transferred to the central server, which in this case is called IREF. So if that is not done, I think that INEC, on my own part, like everybody keep blaming beavers. I don't blame beavers. I think beavers worked. What didn't work was the human element. What didn't work was those INEC deployed to ensure that beavers work.
Of the law and what the law says in very
These are the people that, at least unlike what we witnessed.
Thank you. We'll come back to specifics of what the law says. I'd like to go back to our guest, Paul, who is of the Yiaga Africa. A lot of people were very hopeful that this election will be so transparent, and so many people didn't even think about the IREF. They thought about what Yiaga Africa will be giving us as an independent body that has performed tremendously well, especially in the off-season elections that we had in Osun and Ekiti states. So we were hoping that will come. But I'd like to ask you this. I don't know if you have information as to the server that INEC used. Because before the elections, when the chairman of INEC was addressing the people, he said that he was not going to use the regular service providers that we have here for our phones and all that. They named something else that would have been better, and there was not going to be any form of no network here or there. I don't know if you have that information. But apart from that, because that one is just a yes or no answer, or maybe, apart from that, I'd also like to ask if in the coming elections, maybe not the one of 11, but if it is possible, are there other ways that you can explore to make sure that you are not solely dependent on INEC to get all the records that you need to get before doling out to the people of Nigeria? Is that a possibility on your table as well?
Well, sadly, we cannot put ourselves ahead of what the law provides. The law is very clear that INEC is the regulatory body for election. INEC is the body that is started with the conduct of the election. So we have to be dependent on whatever INEC publish. But that's also why we are also providing that citizen oversight, that independent assessment of the process. But then to backtrack also on all of this, on the part of INEC, we thought there was also, there was not that commitment on the part of INEC to even get through this process. I give you this, for instance. On the 3rd of January this year, INEC dispatched the last sets of the beavers to all the states. Between the 4th and the 11th of January, INEC tested the beavers at the level of their state offices. INEC never made public the results from the field testing of these beavers. We made attempt to go and assess this. INEC told us that it was a routine internal process. From the 14 states that were able to observe out of the 32 states and the FCT, we saw challenges with accessing the internet, for instance. We saw concerns also about installing some of the features of the beavers, like the fingerprint scanners not working effectively, concerns with cameras, concerns with the power buttons and all of that. In states like Edo, there was complaint as of that moment that Edo had a short supply of the beavers. Edo had 40% short supply of the beavers. So you expect that for this kind of estimate that is supposed to inspire public confidence, that the commission should have been bold enough to tell Nigerians so that we know how to do, one, crisis management, two, manage expectations until this happened. Now, we also went to this election with high hopes because of what we saw from the mock exercise that INEC conducted. Almost everything checked from the mock exercise. INEC deployed, in some cases, even 2 or more beavers to some location. Based on the report we gathered from the mock exercise, on the average, the beavers, the process voters, it took 2 minutes to process a voter in 74% of locations. It took between 3 minutes or more in 26% of locations, which provide an indication that overall that process worked. Like the last caller has said, we thought there is also the concern with the human element that managed this entire process. Before this process, back in December, the civil society had engaged INEC and asked specifically, are we ready for this election? INEC said yes. Are we ready from the grounds of technology? INEC said yes. Do we have enough bandwidth to manage the kind of data that is expected? INEC said yes. Until we went into these elections, we were all expecting that these things were going to work. I expect on the eve of the election, for instance, that should have been a last-minute test. And if this were not going to work, INEC should have been bold enough to come out to tell Nigerians this wasn't going to work. Nobody will put a gun to their head. But as far as I know also, the device itself is supposed to have the ability to do a transmission to an INEC server, because if you remember, what was submitted was a scanned image of the results. But there was also the results that was imputed on the beavers that was transmitted to the INEC server, which, to my mind, is the granular data. Perhaps this is what Nigerians are asking. If there is problem with the paper copies that were submitted online, can INEC also submit the granular data for public scrutiny? In the effort to inspire confidence, especially as we are approaching the next elections on March 11, we need to begin to see this kind of positive communication that inspires confidence. I saw one this morning from the National Commissioner for Voter Education, Festus Okoye, that they were not going to jettison the submission of results on the IREF. But even the one that we have as it were at the moment, INEC is yet to finish uploading results. Election happened on Saturday. 4 days after the election, INEC is still submitting the results. I am not sure this is a good way to inspire confidence in the results management process.
It's serious. Well, people who are tech savvy say that whatever happens, the good thing about beavers and technology is that there's always footprints. There are always footprints where you can trace what went wrong and where it went wrong and all that. And the people who are saying that they're going to explore all legal means, is it possible to trace these digital footprints that will give them a case, or this might just be an effort in futility?
Well, I think they have a case to make, especially because this has the backing of the law. If you go to section 47 of the Electoral Act, for instance, it now allows INEC to use any technology in the election. So it is public knowledge that INEC applied technology in this election. And then I don't think INEC will be stupid enough to not allow Nigerians the opportunity to see the end-to-end approach of the deployment of the technology in the election. What is even annoying to me is whether it is ignorance or arrogance on the part of INEC. I was in Kenya last August, and then I saw a heavy deployment of the INEC team to Kenya to come and understudy Kenya. This same process was applied in Kenya. And for Kenya, it was even at different levels. From the polling unit level, the ward level, the local government, everything was submitted online. We may argue that that Kenya is a small country as compared to Nigeria. But why do we keep wasting these resources every time? And then the more investment you make in the election, the less results you get. This is the worst of the election as far as I know since I started observing election in the history of elections in Nigeria, in terms of turnout, in terms of the performance of the commission. And I think this is totally unacceptable. INEC needs to purge itself. We have confidence crisis here, and we're going into another important election. INEC needs to redeem itself before we go into that election.
Okay, thank you. Let me come to you, Jide. There are some places, according to how Paul said earlier on, that the reason for overvoting is that in some places the beavers didn't work and they resorted to just voting without using the beavers. In these places, according to law, can they be said to have voted at all? Jide?
It seems we just like to argue over these issues. Let me echo what we have in section 47, subsection 3. It says where a smart card reader or any other technological device deployed for accreditation of voters fails to function in any unit, and a fresh card reader or technical device is not deployed. That means if one does not function, you are supposed to ask for another one. The election in that unit shall be cancelled and another election shall be scheduled within 24 hours. But like I said earlier, the provision of the law is if the commission, talking about INEC now, is satisfied that the result of the election in that polling unit will substantially affect the final result of the whole election and declaration of a winner in the constituency concerned. So you can see the discretion I'm talking about. So perhaps if this law stopped at that the election in that unit shall be cancelled and another election shall be scheduled within 24 hours, and if the commission is satisfied, it's not part of it at all, then we have, a safer spectrum. And these are the issues we are discussing here. Because we can go on and on and on and on and argue to the right and the left. It still comes down to interpreting the laws. And, constitutionally speaking, it is the tribunal and the courts of competent jurisdictions that have the prerogative to interpret what is on ground now. But if we need to fine-tune our processes, we need a system that works and that specifies our expectations and concretize it in our laws. You see, it's as simple as that. And it should have been envisaged before now. Like we have mentioned here, I have said it, INEC got 305 or presented a budget for 305 billion for this 2023 election, in addition to the 40 billion annual budget. And so you would have expected INEC, said they were going to deploy electronics and tested and things like that. So on the scale of returns on investment, there are expectations. But I'm saying now that we need to pay more attention to the specific clauses used in our laws. You recall the case of Shiloh, who contracted indebtedness with a pound of flesh. And they got to court, and he told the other guy, you can get your pound of flesh, but it is not stated in the agreement that you shed blood. So get your pound of flesh without shedding blood. And that is what I'm advocating, really. We must make progress. Now, it was card reader the last time. At the time, it was manual. Now we are going to beavers. And from some of the explanations we have received, that with beavers, you may not need internet services, but with IREP, you need internet services. Then can we ensure we have these internet services? If you are going to copy anything that was deployed in Kenya or America, be prepared for it. The same Naira swap challenges that we are having.
All right,
we are saying that
just let's take a breather.
Let us upskill our system to be effective and reliable.
Thank you. Let's just take a breather for a few seconds. Just take this break. Stay with us, gentlemen. We'll be back in a moment. We're glad to know you're still there. It's still Plus Politics on Plus TV Africa. My name is Nyamgul Agaji. We're talking with Paul James, head of election program Yiaga Africa, Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner, and also Dr. Obinna Chukwu, another legal practitioner. We're looking at the outcome of elections, and what the Labour Party has said is that they are going to explore all legal avenues to reclaiming the mandate, because they believe that the mandate is theirs or was theirs and was taken from them. And we're looking at the possibilities of this ever happening and seeing also what happened on that day of the election and afterwards. And then we're talking about the legal angles to these things that we're talking about. I'd like to come to you, Dr. Obinna Chukwu, on this one. When Jide was talking, there was something he kept mentioning, that there is a clause that says that when INEC is satisfied with what is happening and they deem it or they've seen it that the outcome of whatever is in contention will affect the overall elections, they need to cancel that place. And all the other things surrounding that didn't concern me. What concerned me was the word satisfied. Now, when you give someone the free hand to use his discretion as it satisfies you, what is the measurement for this satisfaction? Is it a personal measurement, or it is what the law says? Does anybody have that right, that power to say, okay, the law has told me that when I need to use my discretion, whenever I am satisfied, I can do X, Y, Z? What is the measurement for this satisfaction before we can say it will stand in the face of the law?
Okay. I do agree with my learned brother that we need to be definite in our laws. I do agree with him on that. Then again, regarding what you said, I think that this satisfaction of discretion placed on INEC in this instance is measurable, because the provision in that section, section 47, I think sub 3, the provisions there is to the extent that if the commission is satisfied that the election in that polling unit or in that area, as the case may be, requires cancellation and organization of another election within 24 hours, especially if the outcome, if the total number of the accredited voters in the area or areas affected will not substantially affect the outcome of the election or affect who becomes the winner. So to me, that is measurable, because if you have, take for instance, Nigeria, if you have cancellation in up to say 2,000 polling units, and in those polling units, each of them has 500 voters and all that. If you times that 2,000, you will see that will give you almost like it will give you like a million, like 2 million votes, or like a million votes. And looking at the figures that came out, or the outcome, the final figures from the collation, you will find out that the difference between the winner and the second and the People's Democratic Party that came second is less than 2 million. So to me, to that extent, that is the measure to ascertain. Invariably, if you're looking at the law from that angle, one can conclude that the discretion given to INEC in that instance is measurable. And since INEC may not, in a general election, may not know how many polling units or areas or local governments that were cancelled or to be cancelled. So the conclusion there will only be that once there is a cancellation in a particular place, there must be election, or election should be held in that place within 24 hours. Again, look, even from this collated result, if you look at the number of cancellation from the various states, you will see that if you add up or mop up all those figures, for instance, they may be well up to 500,000. And again, in some elections, for instance, assuming this election had gone for
let's try to wrap up. Let's try to wrap up, please. Go ahead. I said just summarize. Let's wrap up.
Okay. Assuming this election had gone into runoff, one vote would have been important because the law provides for the candidates or the parties that may hit or that may go for runoff. So to that extent, like I said, I do agree that our law should be definite. But in terms of having measures to check or to ascertain this discretion, one would say that there are quite some measures there. But going forward, we must ensure that our laws are definite without giving so much discretion to INEC. And whatever discretion that must be given to INEC, it must be by way of guideline. INEC must provide guidelines that will become a subsidiary law that all the parties will know and will follow.
Okay. Well, I know that these issues will not see the end in anytime soon. We keep learning every day. We keep learning every day. In this country, there was a time that the reigning word was zero allocation to the National Assembly, to states, to wherever money should have gone. And then in this election, just before the voting, we had things like placeholders that we didn't hear in other elections and all that. So vocabulary is improving according to our politicians and everything around them. Well, I'd like to just thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of our program. First of all, Jide Ologun, thank you so much for being a part of our program today.
God bless Nigeria.
Dr. Obinna Chukwu, you have also been very wonderful on the show today. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thank you.
And we also had Paul James, Head, Election Program, Yiaga Africa. Thank you so much for being a part of the program, and thanks to Yiaga Africa for doing a wonderful job.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay. So that's the much we can take on the program today. Whatever issues are left to be discussed, we can discuss that tomorrow or another day on the program. In the meantime, my name is Nyamgul Agaji, wishing you a wonderful night rest.